Does this also tell us, Brian, that the DPRK goes into these proposed talks with a bit of leverage?
I think it does. I think the North Koreans are, there's a big difference between North Korea and South Korea. North Korea has complete sovereignty. South Korea does not. Actually, with 30,000 American troops in South Korea, the South Korean government has to always think, well, what will America think? What will Washington think? The DPRK does not have to think like that about Moscow or about Beijing, because it truly is an independent and sovereign country. It's not on its knees. Yes, the sanctions are going to hurt, but I think all parties now know, and I think the North Koreans know, even though China and Russia voted yes on the sanctions, Russia and China don't want a war, and they don't want the implosion of the North Korean government. So I think there's a lot of confidence there.
Song, China, of course, watching all these developments very closely. Beijing has already expressed its support for these talks. Let's take a listen.
We have noticed the positive messages expressed by the leaders of the DPRK and RoK on improving bilateral relations and the DPRK's participation in the Olympic Games. This is a good thing. The Chinese government welcomes the two sides in taking advantage of this opportunity and making concrete efforts to improve bilateral ties, alleviate the situation on the peninsula, and realize the denuclearization of the peninsula.
So, in the short term, what does Beijing hope these talks will accomplish?
I think in the coming future, Beijing hopes to see the two Koreas to at least join hands together and hold these Winter Olympic Games successfully and create some very positive atmosphere for this dialogue to move ahead. But we still don't know what's going to happen, and I do not believe this RoK is having a lot of leverage, because it's all finally up to Washington to decide a lot of very important things. But we hope this can be a very positive beginning for the process to move ahead.
Yonho Kim, we already heard that the so-called hotline, the border hotline between South Korea and the DPRK has been restored. There's also the possibility that the DPRK will be at the Winter Olympics. And the United States has agreed to cease these military exercises. So in a sense, have we already seen some accomplishments?
Sure. The so-called dual suspension proposed by China and Russia also has been rejected by both North Korea and the United States. But what we are watching here is, I would say, dual delay of nuclear and missile tests and joint U.S. RoK military exercises. So as far as we can see this happening until after the Winter Olympics Games, I think it is safe to say we're watching some kind of progress on the nuclear front. But as one of our guests here said, that the problem is what would happen after that, and what kind of so-called concessions both South Korea and the United States is willing to make, and that homework is also to North Korea also. So I don't think Trump administration really wants to go to war with North Korea, but it seems to me that they're increasingly realizing that war may not be avoidable if North Korea keep the pace of its current development of a nuclear weapon system.
Even though we're talking about a country that's got nuclear arms, do you think they would consider war against North Korea, against the DPRK?
I mean, still the probability is relatively low, but what many people are saying is the probability is relatively increasing compared to before. And we don't know whether President Trump is really serious about it, or he's just playing his cards against North Korea. That kind of unpredictability and uncertainty really makes a lot of people concerned. And when it comes to the security and prosperity of the Korean Peninsula, it's really a big problem now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think some this administration's high-level officials believe that full-scale kind of war is dangerous, but limited kind of military option may be acceptable, like the preemptive strike or preventive strike against some specific targets of ICBM or nuclear weapons in DPRK. tolerable for America.
That will lead to war, though, because I think it's
Yeah.
quite clear that DPRK isn't bluffing. With Trump, you never know. He's so much bluff, so much bluster, you never know. But I think the North Koreans have said, bottom line, if we're attacked, we will strike back. And what does that mean? No one knows for sure, but it might mean a nuclear counterattack, certainly an artillery counteroffensive that would decimate a big part of South Korea, including thousands of American troops. I think the stakes are so high. Kim Jong Un said there's a 0 chance of a war in his New Year address. I mean, that's fairly important that the North Koreans actually said that. And I think the United States, there's a lobby within the United States that says, yes, war is inevitable. Let's have it. Let's get it over with sooner rather than later. But I think the dominant thinking right now must be that this would be a disaster. This would be the kind of madness it's not riskable.
Let me go back to Chad in Seoul. Chad, let's look at the diplomacy of this. The United States State Department has been commenting on these planned talks. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
If the two countries decide that they want to have talks, that would be certainly their choice. Kim Jong Un may be trying to drive a wedge of some sort between the two nations, between our nation and the Republic of Korea. I can assure you that that will not happen. That will not occur. We are very skeptical of Kim Jong Un's sincerity in sitting down and having talks.
So, Chad, does this, in a way, drive a wedge between South Korea and the United States, as some analysts have been alleging?
No, it doesn't have to drive a wedge between the two countries. And Moon Jae-in, the South Korean president, is he has a sort of middle support in South Korea. He was voted in after the ousting of former President Park Geun-hye. So he has to balance interest from both the conservatives in South Korea to an extent and, of course, his mainly liberal supporters. As a result, he won't want to rock the boat too much in making any radical outreach towards North Korea. The other thing to bear in mind is that this has to occur within the framework of UN sanctions. So it's very difficult for Moon Jae-in to do anything that would really upset the US. For example, reopening the Kaesong industrial complex, restoring tourism to the Kumgang resort in North Korea. These are things that right now would not sit well with the US policy of maximum pressure. So in a nutshell, there are a lot of organic, if you will, barriers to Moon Jae-in doing anything that will really lead to big distance between Washington and Seoul at the moment.
Okay, we need to take a quick break right now. More of our conversation when we return. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.